probably 2.5 years, I did about $50,000 in sales, and probably 30%, 40% of that was on products of my own. If it takes you 100 conversations to make one sale, and that one sale equals $1,000, then theoretically you could know the math to get to a $10,000 month. So then you got to figure out ways to take it from 100 to 50. Now, can I make one sale every 50 conversations? Blake came in and I think in his first month did 10K.
Welcome, Todd. Great to have you here and that you agreed to this interview. And what I really like about you is that you have been in the Facebook organic marketing space and the online coaching space for quite a while. But recently you decided to leave this interest. So I'm really curious about what you've learned, what your takeaway was, and how you work with another expert that I highly admire, Blake Fontana, worked out. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the online marketing / coaching space in the first place, and then what happened next.
Cool. Thanks, Martin. So I guess the background is I've spent most of my career doing data management and analytics for pharmaceutical companies. And when it was around the time COVID hit, I guess I started a little before it got serious, but I really jumped in January of 2020. And I couldn't really tell you why, other than I was looking for some sort of entrepreneurial experience. I really hadn't done any sales and marketing to speak of. At least I was doing consulting, so I did some version of selling, but it was never my focus. And I just had an interest in learning about that area of the business that I'd really never been exposed to, and stumbled into the affiliate marketing experience and got pretty interested in it for a while, and kind of really just wanted to see where I could take it. So I jumped in to an affiliate marketing program, and from there, whatever, one thing leads to another. And eventually
do you still remember what was the entry point or someone specific, some program that you joined?
Yeah. So I had some version of, I'd been trying to figure out some sort of entrepreneurial side hustle for at least 5 years at that point. Not too hard, but I had dabbled in a few programs, figuring maybe I could do some of my data and analytics somehow, and maybe as a consultant, but then I realized I didn't really want to do my same job on the side that I was doing as my career. But I remember saying to myself one day, I know I can figure this out, and this is going to be the year, 2020, I'm going to get it done. And actually, it was a little before that where I started. I guess it was probably around Thanksgiving in 2019 where I had that epiphany, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. And lo and behold, one of the Russell Brunson One Funnel Away ads came up on my screen, and I clicked it. And what was it called? It was the Affiliate Boot Camp, was the free lead-in to the One Funnel Away. And so I jumped into that, and of course they immediately upsell you to One Funnel Away. But in the Affiliate Boot Camp, so I did the One Funnel Away, and I was blown away initially. I was like, oh, this is it. I'm going to be a ClickFunnels affiliate, and the rest will be history, like so many other people probably. But once I got into it, I realized at some point I was like, I didn't really know what to do next. You know what I mean? Like it got good until towards the end, and I was like, I don't really know how to exactly sell the ClickFunnels. So I dove back into the Affiliate Boot Camp, and I don't know if you ever saw that, but I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a booklet of stories of marketers who I think maybe they did the, if you only had 30 days or 90 days or something, how would you build a business? And Jacob Karras was in that. He was listed in there because he had recently won the dream car, I think. And so he just had a really compelling story. And I started stalking him online. I just found his stuff on Facebook or whatever, and eventually ran across a guy who was in his new program, which was the Super Affiliate Accelerator, SAA for short. And I guess that's recently been retired, but it was a big deal in the industry for a while. It was a pretty strong program that a lot of people got into. And so that's what I did. And I learned a ton from Jacob, and through that program I ended up working with Jacob on some of his follow-on things. Probably 2.5 years-ish. I did about $50,000 in sales, and probably 30%, 40% of that was on products of my own, that was probably my claim to fame. I ended up selling master classes. I wrote that book with Blake, workshops, a few things like that. Ended up doing pretty good amount of, for me, right, on the scale that I was doing things. The most exciting part ultimately was creating something from my own ideas that I went on to be able to sell to other people. That was a different way of looking at things. I think couple lessons learned, right, is there's really no new information under the sun, right? Like, it's, in terms of marketing, the fundamentals have been the same for a couple hundred years at this point, I would say. How you execute them today looks a little different than it did 100 years ago, but still the basic premise is you got to get attention. You have to have an offer that people want to buy, and you have to figure out how to get their attention, get an audience's attention to you, and get it sold. And so anyway, I thought it was incredibly valuable. And not to take us down a different path, but eventually, as a result of my sales and marketing experience, I went from the work that I had been doing to take on an enterprise sales role in the same industry. So I ended up taking a sales job at a company. And I wouldn't have even dreamed of doing that if it hadn't been for the sort of affiliate marketing experience. So anyway, point being, I learned a lot of really valuable, important.
So one question that I have is, you mentioned like you transitioned to this position, like from like working in some kind of industry and then also working as a consultant, like, and then you did go into that like full time, or like how did it go, like time wise, or like how much time did you invest and how much did you spend to learn the skills? So these are questions that I just try to figure out, just to get a feel for the market, because I feel a lot of people are still in the same position that you were 4 years ago.
Gotcha. No, that's good. So I stayed full time in the industry work that I've been doing for 20 years at that point. It's going on 24 years now that I've been in that industry, and I never left. At one point, I thought that I might want to do that, but I've been doing it for a long time, and it's been pretty good to me. And at some point, I realized that investing in my career the way I did was the better return on my investment was to stay put. But like I said, without this kind of side hustle experience, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today, which is greatly improved, I'd say, as a result. And for me, I was in the affiliate marketing space for a full 6 months. I think maybe it was 5 months before I made my first sale of any kind, and it was like $49 or something. It took a long time, and I was devoting a lot of hours in the first 6 months, really. Like, I didn't, again, COVID picked up, so there wasn't as much kind of day job to interfere, and you had a lot more time at home and stuff like that. So I went hard at it for a while, trying to build an audience, working on learning content and how to sell and market, basically. And so I would say I was probably
what was your approach to building an audience at that time?
basically just using Facebook, and I did a variety of video and text. I started off with writing, just doing posts basically, and got a little bit of attention, built up some relationships that way, and eventually one of the best things about the overall whole experience really was pushing into things that I hadn't ever done before. And so one of the things I wasn't super comfortable doing was being on video as a solo marketer or whatever. And so somebody suggested this 21-day video challenge, and there was a framework. It wasn't like in a formal, like you had to pay for it or anything like that. Somebody just put out the prompts, and so I grabbed them and I just decided to do that. And it got a surprising amount of attention. I think video does tend to increase the level of kind of personal connection. You get to know people a little bit better in some sense. And I also think taking the risk, putting yourself out there, attracts people who are just behind you, which is perfect for what you're trying to do in that case. Is you want to be a little bit of a leader and know something that other people don't, so you can help them along. And I think the video helped with that, which eventually spurred me to starting to build my own Facebook group, which I had, gosh, I don't even know. I think I had about 500 people in it, maybe, when I ended it. And so anyway, the group became a pretty good place, whereas people who really wanted to who were interested in what you were doing. And that led me to doing all kinds of educational stuff. I ended up doing a weekly video. I think I might have missed like 1 week, but I did 56 or 8 weeks. So I did it over more than a year of video. It was educational, and entertaining would be a stretch, but it wasn't all like lectures, but it was just what's going on in my world. I can't remember what all I did in there. There was some kind of education component, there was a business component, and a mindset component. So I did those three things with slides so people could refer to some of the info, and that seemed to go a long ways too towards building interest in who I was and what I was doing. And a lot of my stuff, ironically, even through the videos, still focused on written content, because that's what I really like doing. I love to write. I learned a lot. I still follow email lists of email marketers. I think that's something that you can use in every industry, including my current one. And clear communication is invaluable at every kind of level of business, I would say.
Absolutely. One question, like with your experience, if you're looking back, would this, like, who would this path be ideal for, or what are your biggest takeaways that you've learned from just going down this route of creating your Facebook group, getting yourself out there? Just tell me a little bit about your experience and your recommendation to people who consider going down that route.
I think I think so for somebody getting started, I think the social media organic path is a viable one, and it's probably the best way to start for somebody that has more time than money. And you have to, I think that's probably the first thing to realize. Your first decision point is, you know, which which do I have more of? Do I have more time, or do I have more money? If you're going to spend a bunch of money, you could potentially go down another path, potentially going direct to ads, building your own offers, things like that. But I feel like if you're a real novice stepping into this world, affiliate marketing with an organic social media approach is really a good way to go, because you learn the fundamentals. Unfortunately, I would say too, people really should go in it with open eyes. I feel like I'm a pretty pragmatic person, and I still was surprised by how long it took me to make a sale, to really figure things out. I've been doing business for, like I said, 20 years at this point, and it took me a while. And I think you learn the fundamentals of sales and marketing. One way to do it is through that affiliate marketing and the organic approach. And I think it's a really good way to go if you don't have any background. If you do have a background, there might be another path, and I couldn't necessarily speak to that. But I think the other thing is people have to recognize that where money is involved, it's hard to get other people to give their money away. So if you're trying to get people to give you money, that approach is going to be probably a little flawed. What you really need to do is bring something to the table that's of high value, that essentially makes the exchange of money a no-brainer, right? If they buy the thing from you, they're going to get value beyond what they paid for. And that's, it probably sounds obvious, but it's much harder to achieve than you might think. And so, like for me, I probably made it a little harder in some ways by creating my own products, workshops, things like that. But I also really enjoyed the creative aspects, so it was important for me to have that. And the flip side is, if you're in affiliate marketing, you've probably got potential to find some higher quality products that have already been proven, but you're also competing with a bunch of other, people who are trying to do the same thing. And so there's trade-offs no matter which way you go. So yeah.
In terms of, like, just going back to the book that you wrote with Blake Fontana, in there you have, this is pretty much built on math, and basically what it says is like the formula, or maybe from your, because I think you still remember, please tell us a little bit about profit prediction formula, which is also the title of the book.
Yeah, you're right. It is built on math, which is also hard to sell to people. But I guess what I would say is, basically Blake and I were very like-minded in our approach, despite coming from really different backgrounds. We just both saw the process. It's like everybody talks about, there is a funnel, right? Like, you start with a certain number of people who might be interested, and say it's this big. Eventually the number of buyers is only going to be this big, and you want to be able to track people through that process where they are in your funnel. So the profit prediction formula is really just the math to get you there. And it's really interesting because I created that formula on my own by digging in and doing the work and just keeping track. At one point, I was like, man, I'm having hundreds of messenger conversations with people. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. But I realized pretty quickly, being a data guy, that I didn't actually know if that was true. I didn't know how many conversations I was having, and I didn't know how long it was taking me to convert those conversations into sales. And so I was like, I got to figure this out to just know if I have anything to complain about or where I might be able to fix things. And so basically just started tracking everything. When I started, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew I was having conversations, and some of those would lead to calls, and eventually some of those would lead to sales or whatever. And so I started tracking all that stuff. And basically, in short, the formula just tracks that. And the idea was if it takes you 100 conversations to make one sale, and that one sale equals $1,000, then theoretically you could know the math to get to a $10,000 month, right? Like I just lost track of what I said, but I guess you'd need to have 1,000 conversations in a month to get there, right? And that's a lot, by the way. It's a lot of conversations. It can be really taxing on your mental state to have real conversations. So if you come to that with knowing it takes 100 conversations, at some point you actually know that is a lot. That's maybe more than you're willing or able to do in the time that you have. And so then you got to figure out ways to take it from 100 to 50, right? And now can I make one sale every 50 conversations? And a couple of things happens there. One is if you know how many conversations you need to have, then you can prioritize those appropriately. Because I know for me, I liked writing more than I liked having Facebook Messenger chats. So I'd prioritize writing. And in some ways that was good because I learned a skill that I think people appreciated. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But at the same time, when you're not filling your pipeline with conversations, you're never going to make consistent sales. So once I started tracking that, I realized that I had to balance those things. So I couldn't just write every day for a week and expect sales to pour in, because that's just not how it works. You need to be having those conversations. You need to stay top of mind. You need to find people who might be interested. I think it was Chet Holmes who did the funnel that basically says of your audience, basically 3% are ready to buy right now and 97% aren't. Some people don't know who you are. Some people or barely know who you are. Some people know who you are, but they don't have that problem burning right now, so they're not going to buy. And the marketing aspect and the conversation aspect is intended to move people through that funnel, but also just keep you top of mind so that when the time is right, they think, oh, they have something I want and now I'm ready to buy it, so they know where to go. And so anyway, it's a pretty long answer, but that's what the formula was about. And it's for me, I guess the last thing I'll say on it, if you're into gamification in any way, shape, or form, it's a really good way to go because there's value in having conversations. If you just focus on sales, oh, I'm failing if I'm only making sale, if I'm not making sales, I think most people are going to give up before they get over the hurdle because you're just not going to make that many sales when you get started. If you don't have a background in it, you've got to work through the process. And so for me, having X number of conversations per day leads to X number of conversations per week and per month, which ultimately leads you to hopefully a number of sales that is close. And it's never going to be perfect. Like one month it might be 50, next month it might be 30, the next month it might be 80. It's not always going to be perfect, but once you've done it over months and years, which I didn't get to years, but over months you started to see it level out around a number that was pretty consistent for me. And anyway, having some success without sales is, I think, really important to sticking with the game.
Exactly. One question that I have now that you have some perspective on this, and probably you also know other people in the space who had really success with this approach, like what should we sell or what would you recommend to sell in the first place? Because especially if you're in this affiliate marketing game, it's really hard to make the numbers work, especially if you're selling lower ticket items compared to like more expensive, more immersive coaching programs where you charge a couple of $1,000. What's your perspective on that?
I'm going to say what comes to mind, which I think won't be that appealing to a lot of people, but based on my experience, I feel like you could almost pick any affiliate marketing product that you feel you understand, you have some affinity for, you resonate with. And I would almost, again, it's not going to be super popular, but I would actually say go into an affiliate marketing opportunity that you think is reasonable quality, and essentially just expect to invest 6 months of your life learning. Try to make sales, of course, but understand that you've got to invest in learning some skills that not everyone in the world has, right? You have to get good at something, right? You can canvas Facebook and you can make a couple sales here and there, and that can feel good. But in the end, I think you've got to be different somehow. And so with that investment of time, 6 months is honestly a bare minimum, but it's like some people do it faster, right? Blake came in and I think in his first month did 10K, or maybe it was 2 months, whatever, but he had a sales background, right? Like he grew up selling. So he knew how to do that part, which I didn't. So I'm not, 6 months may be the wrong number, but I think for novices, especially, there's a lot of introverts. Like I'm an introvert. There's a lot of people who come to online marketing and sales for the purpose of, or there's some safety, right? Hiding behind the screen. You're not like a door-to-door salesman or whatever. I think that's fine. It can be done, but it's going to be a little slower road for anybody who doesn't want to talk to somebody. I believe that. There's a lot of people out there selling exclusively through writing. Email marketing is killing it for Ben Settle and Daniel Throssell and some of those guys, right? It can be done, but again, you're not going to just start there, right? You've got to come in and build up skills and somehow be different, really, or just really be exceptional at the fundamentals. Maybe that's a better way to put it. I don't know if you have to be different, but you have to be great at something in order to expect a great return on your investment, essentially.
That makes sense. So if somebody wants to get started in this area, what would be your advice there? Like how to build or like even like where to find your audience?
It's honestly, I think that's the hardest part. I think it's the hardest part for everyone. But following the basic process that I did is it's as good a way to go as any. I think the grass is always greener. There's different platforms at different times that are hot, right? Like Facebook has its pluses and minuses. Actually, I've seen people doing well on Twitter in a way that seems like it could be interesting. LinkedIn, if you're doing something a little more, I'm not sure about affiliate marketing on LinkedIn, but there are coaches doing really well there in particular. And so I don't TikTok. I never did TikTok, but I think there's a lot of similarities in the sense of the AIDA model. AIDA is those fundamentals we're talking about, right? Like capture, get attention, interest, that sort of thing. I think those are the parts that are hardest. So however you want to do it, again, whether it's video on a TikTok or written content on Facebook or Twitter or something like that, you've essentially got to put out a message for an audience. You've got to figure out what that audience likes. What are their pain points, right? What is it that is going to compel somebody to be looking for a solution and then ultimately pull the trigger to buy that solution? And this is where it gets hard, right? I think I was even guilty of this in a way. I think a lot of people come in and they're like, oh, I'm going to find this affiliate marketing product and somebody else is going to tell me how to do everything to sell it. And it's like that, but at the same time, you have to bring something to the table where you're pulling out the pain points. And if the pain points are, I want to make money online, like that's not good enough, right? I think maybe 15 years ago it might have been, from the sounds of it. It was before my time, but like now you've got to be pointing to like specific how-tos, or not necessarily how-tos in your content, but the solution needs to be very precise and it needs to match the buyer. For example, like I was just talking about, I've seen a lot of people, not a lot, I've seen some people do a good job selling to introverts. Jacob had a no-call sales something or other that he was doing. There's another guy, Sean Anthony, who's I'm on his email list, and he's got some similar version of this where it's like we write Google Docs and we do content and whatever. And so I know I'm not giving you a real precise answer here, but I honestly think now getting started, even if I were to go back, if I wanted to get into affiliate marketing, it would be hard because I don't know what the latest and greatest programs are out there. And personally, I would, because of the experience I have, I would come up with something of my own, right? And being an affiliate, you end up giving away a big chunk of the revenue to the product owner. And once you can get beyond that stage, I think it's better to do your own thing.
I think this gives a really like realistic perspective thing, because this is what I've witnessed on my own. Like especially in affiliate marketing, there's always trends, and you have to be in the right place promoting the right product when it's hot, or like when there's like a shift in the marketplace for some reason, like something that we've seen recently with ChatGPT and AI. Yeah. So there were a lot of like AI products taking off. The same I've seen something like this in the past, like with clickfunnels, where they suddenly took off. Or we have seen that when there was a huge shift, when people like when Go High Level got a lot of traction, so people sold their own white labeled software. So there's always trends in the market that we can capitalize on, but these trends are also like they have an expiry date. At some point the tide turns, and if you then have not capitalized on that, building your own skills, building your own audience, then you're basically back at square one. Maybe you had a strategy that worked, you had a product that sold, but now, for example, clickfunnels is the best example. They pre-sold a software as a Kickstarter project, and then they were not able like to fully deliver a bug-free software. So at some point, like the sales completely plummeted, and that left me with no business, so to speak. And the same happened also in the crypto space, where there was like this huge wave when everybody was getting into crypto. So I had success selling a crypto product, but then the whole market tanked, and then I was left without a product. And like even in that case, because I had skin in the game, I lost like a lot of money that I've made with affiliate marketing in the first place. So it's also about like this, there's always nuance, and in the end it's really about having, especially if you're using free traffic strategies, it's about like really more about the process and living and breathing the process. And that goes back to the profit prediction formula, where it's really about, if I have this kind of number of conversations and I sell this like coaching product or whatever, I know that I will make X amount per month. So that's like, that has been my experience. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you.
I know, I love the way you put that, and I feel like it would be a very unpopular, like this is not good marketing to get people into the space, but I think it's realistic in the sense that it doesn't, first of all, you're totally right. There's the trend piece is actually really important, and I forgot about that until you just reminded me. But to some degree, on the plus side of that is, it doesn't matter what you get into as long as you believe in what it is that you're selling. You can see the value. You can see value to somebody buying it. Then I feel like the approach for somebody getting started is invest your time in learning the skills, and you have to forget about the outcome anyway. Like in the end, like your product needs to be helpful. Like it legitimately needs to be helpful. Otherwise you're just taking money from people, and it won't, it can't last, right? In the space, trends are definitely a big part of it, and have come and gone in the time that I have been in, and I still keep an eye out. But I think investing in those skills, like what you're doing at this point, right? Like you've probably learned some hard lessons through this stuff, but you've got the fundamental skills. And so honestly, this is like, I haven't done this, so I'm speaking out of turn in some ways. I did it in a very small scale, But I do think in the end, let me put it this way, it's going to be easier to sell an iPhone than it is to sell some vague promises of sales and marketing success to people. And I'm not saying go out and sell iPhones, but the closer you can push to a tangible product that offers a concrete result to somebody, that takes away a pain point that they have, the easier it's going to be, I think, for most people to sell. Even pick it like a toothbrush, right? Like it might not be sexy and it might not be high margin and all that stuff, but people know when they need a toothbrush and they generally know how to, what value that will bring to them. So it makes it a pretty easy sale in a sense. Whereas I feel like I like the groove funnels thing. I know it didn't end all that well, but the concept is great because it was a tangible thing offering a real solution to problems that people in the online sales and marketing had. Obviously, you want there to be a real product when all is said and done. But I guess my point is just, for in some ways, it doesn't matter what product you start with if you're learning the skills, as long as you can see the value that you're offering and expect that it will change in 6 to 12 to 18 months, depending on what kind of thing you're into. But I don't know. It's really interesting. I guess I'll just say one other thing, like that I struggled with, or it took me a while to realize. The internet world seems like it's different. It seems magical, and like maybe I can write a few words and people will send me money, and it's got a little bit of a mystique to it. But when all is said and done, what we're talking about here is real business, right? It's that you might be able to trick people for a while and take their money, but in the end, the people who are going to be successful long term are the people who are offering legitimate value to things that people care about. And it's that simple. So
I think especially in the affiliate marketing world, like there's a huge entertainment factor
right.
where people are just like really good at, and that requires a lot of skill as well, like to create this shiny object, to use all these like perfect marketing, like perfect copy, perfect videos
Right.
that really hit down the pain points and everything. That is like a super like hard to learn, hard to master skill, because the easier something looks, the harder and the more work people actually put into something to make it look
Exactly.
easy. And this is what people see like on these webinars and all these, especially in the make money online world, where it's the real business. And what I've seen recently, they like the whole market has more or less saturated. There's no untapped audiences anymore, and now it really goes back to what you said. There has to be a tangible result, and that's why, for example, like Go High Level is thriving,
Yeah.
because people realize there's a lot of companies or like local companies out there who have not figured this out. Like this whole like, how do I say, like it's more than a website. It really goes to like, how can I retain more clients, how can I automate some of the processes. And this is the advice that's out there right now, that people really look to work with real companies who provide these real tangible outcomes. And the whole entertainment part industry, it's not growing anymore, let's put it like this. There's always new people who get into this industry, they get hooked, but it's not as easy as it was when there were like new platforms launching all the time, and you could just put up an ad and it was like people bought these kind of products when everything was new. Now it's more competitive, and the general knowledge of the market has grown to tremendous levels, and now it's really going back to the basics again and working with the right people. And then there's very few people getting rich now with selling like a $1,000 webinar program. They all have this complete value ladder of having a front end funnel,
Yeah.
and then they have these 10,000 to 25,000 back end coaching programs where the right people get much more support on a weekly basis, because in the end it's really taking one step after the next, building the whole machine, putting the process in place, mastering one skill after the other, and then learning how to do fulfillment and all these things. There's so many levers there. It's like it's a lot to take on.
No, that's right. And you just saying that reminds me too. It can be very overwhelming to get started in that. When you step in, it's tough. I think to an answer maybe slightly differently, a question you asked earlier, I don't necessarily have specifics in mind, but like finding a coach, somebody who could help you with find shortcuts would definitely be money well spent if for people who can afford it. But at the same time, if you're starting from zero, it's probably best to dip your foot in, not jump in the deep end right away, basically, because I think a lot of people come to the space with big hopes and dreams. And like I said, what you're really doing is business, right? So when the novelty wears off, you're in business essentially. And a lot of people, I think, come to find that they're not really interested in that business. And I don't know, I think you and I maybe even chatted about this online. The people who started when I did, within 6 months, I would guess that 70-80% of them were gone. And by 18 months, like 90%, right? Like people come in, they realize it's hard work and that's not what they really were hoping for, right? And so maybe it's not the work for them and then they bounce out. So I think the best thing you could do is go into it with eyes wide open that it's going to be work. You're trying to build a business, not just make money, right? It's you're building a business, and for business to succeed, it has to solve problems, and that's going to require an investment. You got to do the fundamentals, and if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
Absolutely. And in the end, it really comes down to providing the specific result and then charging a fair amount of that. And like that's really what it comes down to, whether it's like losing weight or getting in shape or something like this, where you really provide this, like something that I teach is relate, repeat results. So you need to relate to someone who tells you what kind of action you need to repeat to get the results you want.
Perfect.
And especially in the make money online world, like people get hung up on the repeat part because that's not as exciting.
Yeah.
But in the end, it really comes down to like repeating the same things over and over again until you get traction, until you fine tune your approach, until you learn this form of content or this approach of creating content, or like this type of content is resonating with people. So I need to do more of that. And then it's really an ongoing process. If you look at people like Alex Hamosi, like how much content he is producing to build his personal brand, and he has a huge team. And now it's basically almost every coach out there is asked to do the same. I think really getting into this with realistic expectations and knowing that it's work is what is needed. And I think there's a lot of people who really like this interview because it gives this more realistic perspective. And maybe you have some final words of advice to people getting into the space, because I think we talked for a little bit more than 40 minutes now. Final words of advice?
Probably nothing I haven't already said. I think probably having said it a few times on this conversation, probably the best thing I could repeat is you're getting into it to build a business. It's the only way if you want to endure is this. You have to have something of value that solves a problem that people care about. It's unfortunately simple and unfortunately not that easy, right? It's like you said, you mentioned the Hormozy piece. It's so true. Like when a guru does something, then everybody's doing it, and now you see all the online marketers shouting Hormozy style. So you're gonna have to give it enough time to get good at something specific. And I think just recognizing that is important because it's just not going to happen overnight for 5% of people or whatever. Like it's gonna take some time and effort, and it's a roller coaster too. The other thing I guess I'll just say is the roller coaster is real. Hormozy talks about it. Like there's a bunch of references. I forget what it's called, that Kubler-Ross curve, where you start off excited and then you end up in the pit of despair basically, and then eventually you get some competence and things start to go. And the thing is, that cycle is not a one-time thing, right? Like every new level you hit takes you to a new low, to a new high, to a new low. And I think having a support system, having a long-term perspective, maybe are the two other things that I would just emphasize, right? Like you got to go in eyes wide open and understand that you're building a business and it's going to take some effort.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this interview.